Okay, welcome back to Default Global. This is where we connect with global first entrepreneurs and remote work experts from all around the world to share their experiences. And our guest today is Godspower, who's a founder of AfriSplash. Godspower, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Vit. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And before we start, can you briefly introduce yourself? I know that you are one of those top 50 guys who were just identified as like a remote work experts, a remote work influencers. And I would like to know what this background, what is your background on this?
Awesome, cool. So I would say I'm one of the persons that actually looked at remote work as a way of life from the
Okay.
onset, and not just, I would say, an alternative because of we had COVID-19. So think of it like I've been someone who have been doing remote work before it became cool, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so my background specifically, I'm actually in product, so I build product solutions for tech
Okay.
teams across the world, and it's something I've done across 5 continents, and
Mm.
doing it from my home country here, which is West Africa, Nigeria. And so, apart from building products, I love helping people as well live, work, and succeed from anywhere. So that's like a highlight of what I do. That's fulfillment in helping people, see the possibilities with remote work and get the best of life while actually working as well. Have that great balance and yet achieve the best when it comes to their career potential as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Yeah, so
sounds good.
that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. And from your LinkedIn profile, I also know that you're working on AI-driven solutions for social impact, right? So
Yeah.
I'm just curious to hear more on this, and just maybe you can talk a bit about this, how this AI and language technology can help overcome this communication obstacles between maybe remote teams, remote who are just in different time zones, in different countries, in different continents, right?
Yeah, so there's several use cases for AI, and I think that's what makes it really interesting. We can all build on the capacities and capabilities of AI. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, with the advancement of AI, it means that the way we work would actually change. And so I'm not a believer in the theory going around that AI would actually replace people, but I'm a strong believer in the fact that AI would actually increase productivity, right? It would actually help people, produce even more efficiency when it comes to knowledge work and the future of work. And so, one of the things I think is super interesting when it comes to applying AI for the future of work is the way we actually use AI to solve problems across remote teams. So, one exciting use case is the use of AI, for example, for customer success or customer service, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so previously we had lots of people who would actually attend to, I would say, a wide customer base, and then we
Okay.
have people with different um, fluency level when it comes to languages, and they
Mm-hmm.
might prefer their native language when it comes to attending to their issues and having their problems fixed. So one
Right.
way AI can be super important in that space is probably leveraging machine translation. So when you
Mm-hmm.
think of machine translation, think about it like natural language processing. So
Mm-hmm.
for instance, within a remote team, a customer service person can actually give a response in English, and the AI gives the recipient the same response in their own preferred language
Mm-hmm.
through machine translation, instant translation, and the value of that definitely would enable one global team to solve the need of a global market. Meaning, it doesn't really we don't really care if you are from Brazil, if you are from Russia, if you are from India. Basically, whatever language you actually speak, the AI would actually give you a direct translation without losing things in translation. That would depend on the advancement of AI, definitely. So machine translation is one super important aspect of using AI
Mm-hmm.
to actually drive out, I would say, productivity among teams. Also, when it comes to team building, I think one super important use case was that of Meta, previously Facebook.
Yep.
So I think there is an AI conversational chatbot called Put Me in the Conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So Bota me conversar. So basically, what it does is it helps teams actually get fluent when it comes to communication in the business market. So Meta specifically had a team in Brazil, and they wanted to promote inclusive communication for people in Brazil, right? That
Yep.
distributed team. And so basically, with the use of this conversational bot, which was built specifically for this use case, People within these teams could actually learn more about business terminologies, for example, KPI in
Hmm.
Portuguese, right? And I could
Yeah.
actually, interface with this AI and say, tell me more about KPIs. And with the knowledge of all these things, it's easier to engage in group conversations, right? Because the whole idea is to put them in the conversation, make the conversation inclusive. So the fact that I might not have the same language fluency as the person from the UK wouldn't
Hmm.
actually deter me from actually contributing in a group conversation. That way, it actually promotes inclusiveness, and that's AI solving that challenge, right? So it's a very interesting use case we have there by Meta, and with the advancement of AI, I think we'll see even more and more coming up, and definitely it's going to make a huge change in the global workforce as well. So I think those are the key things we can pick from AI as well in terms of productivity.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. Sounds like people from all around the world will have more opportunities, right, to connect and to get better, jobs, just because I mean this
Definitely.
AI thing can provide them this solution to communicate, right? But it's you're talking about more about, for example, it works through emails, through message Slack, right? So, but like from my perspective, if we work in one team, this video conference, this real talk, this real person, just it's really important in terms of building a sort of team, right? So, what
Yeah.
can you say about this? Do you know maybe any other solutions that can solve this part?
In terms of building a team, right?
Yep.
So that's a very interesting question. So let's look at the application of AI when it comes to hiring, right? The entire hiring process. And so one important thing we do currently is basically allowing people to go through assessment in their own local languages or their preferred languages, right? And by doing that, you are actually understanding that there are differences in terms of language fluency. The fact that English is not your primary language doesn't mean you are less smarter than someone who speaks English fluently, right?
No, no, no.
And so
That's
by
clear. But
trying,
but I'm sorry. My question was just about um uh video conference, video talks, right? So like we have right now. So
yeah,
we are not using any kind of AI because we speak English, right? So, but
yeah,
like
sure,
what you were talking about, it works for text version of this, text communication like email or messengers. But like I said, but it's really important to have like a real person in front of you. It can be
yeah.
monitory or it can be screen, right? So, but you should talk to him directly. So, are there any solutions that can, translate you kind of
Yeah,
online,
definitely. Definitely. I think your point is actually valid when it comes to video communication. So we have what we call ASR, which is automatic speech recognition. Would
Mm-hmm.
actually allow speech to speech
Yeah.
translation. It's still under machine translation, basically. And so if we develop an AI solution, for instance, to actually help with translation, it works on what I give it basically based on the input. And this AI needs to be specifically trained to a domain, right? To
Mm-hmm.
actually give actual accurate translation. So
Right.
if we are speaking about politics, for instance, we want that AI to have been trained fully and refined, fine-tuned on politics to ensure that it's giving me the right concepts, it's giving me the right translation in the context we're actually speaking about. So it applies to technology, it applies to finance. So irrespective of the AI we want to have, we need to ensure that it's trained specifically to actually
Mm-hmm.
handle a general conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that will also depend on the advancement of AI. But at the moment, we have a technology called automatic speech recognition, which would actually help with what you just spoke about right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's I guess it's something that can work. Okay, so let's talk a bit about your company, AfriSplash, right?
Yeah.
And it's a sort of community, right? And as far as I understood, you help investors and companies kind of identify and connect with tech talent across Africa, right? So that's what you're currently doing in your company. Can you
Exactly.
go to, can you give us some more details about this? How exactly you do this, and why investors and companies should go to Africa and find some great talent there? So tell us more about it.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and that's a very good question. So one of the first things we need to understand is that within communities there is a huge potential, and of course, harnessing the power of community can always give a positive result. And so, for instance, you mentioned YC earlier on during one of our conversations. YC, for instance, is a community as well, right? And there's a lot of potential. It's a community of companies, a community of top talents, right? And now
Right.
with AfriSplash, we have one of the youngest ecosystem of talents out there. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, the average age is between 18 to
Okay.
35 of Africans here, and this is actually an emerging workforce. And the potential for the future is definitely promising. And so we also discovered that this is one of the most untapped areas when it comes to talent workforce, right? Not much companies know of the potential within the African tech ecosystem. And it's
Mm-hmm.
very important to bring light to the ecosystem and, of course, show that talents within Africa as well can live, can work, can succeed from anywhere, irrespective of, where they are at. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
super important. So one of the reasons I started the community is because of the importance of building to create an impact. And so
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to actually, go for investors, founders who were mission driven, right? That's a way to actually build a technology that would solve a problem. And by building such community, we're able to bring together these founders and these top talents to actually see a common goal and then work towards that common goal in terms of building impactful solutions on the global stage, which is very, very important. And so AfriSplash became a community, and from a community, it also became a technology platform. And so one way we are also building our platform going forward is through open source technology, right? So we have the open source AfriSplash program, which is basically the community itself building the platform, right? So
Mm-hmm.
with the platform, we have different functionalities around talent matching, visibility, job posting, and everything. But the most important thing within that community is the presence of, I would say, other ecosystems out there. So we are basically
Mm-hmm.
the gateway to Africa's remote workforce,
Okay.
connecting other parts of the world. The global workforce in Europe is actually moving at great speed, North America, Asia as
Mm-hmm.
well. And so we actually, AfriSplash remotely is bringing Africa into that conversation, right? To
Mm-hmm.
show that there is massive potential on the global stage for African talents as well. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's good. And as you're kind of expert in this specific market, right? So, uh, what do you think are maybe common pitfalls companies might face while expanding to specifically to African market
Yeah.
from the talent perspective? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, from a talent perspective, I think one of the first thing is the way they define the hiring process.
Okay.
And sometimes we might see situations of people having an unconscious bias and saying, for instance, within Africa, there's poor infrastructure, and it means I can't get talents that would actually give the best in terms of output, right? And that's a
Mm-hmm.
misconception. That's not the reality because technology is moving at a very crazy speed, right? And so it's easy to always empower your talents to actually get their best work done by empowering them with the right technology. So there are several solutions out
Right.
there that will provide internet access, the right devices, workspace setup for your talents, irrespective of where they are. And they have actually, removed that barrier, that gap, which we have seen in the past. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's no longer, a concern of whether they are well equipped to actually get the job done. It's now a concern of, are these people actually skilled to actually get the job done, which is the case because
Okay.
we have a lot of skilled talents. And so one of the first things is actually challenging those unconscious biases and trying to see beyond that, experiment, take a deep, a step in the water, dip your
Uh-huh.
toes in the water, see how things are within the space without following, the global perception of what Africa is, right? I told someone previously that when people think about Africa, they think about giraffes and zebras, right? So we should start thinking about technology and things
Mm-hmm.
like that right now, which is, I think, improving in a very crazy speed. And
Mm-hmm.
finally, I think apart from that, we also need to see that communication can be learned, skills can be learned, right? But attitude is who a person is. So basically, prioritizing attitude as well. There are people, lots of talents who are out there who are willing to give 110% to actually see your company grow, to actually see your company become profitable. And that's what you should actually look for in these talents as well, apart from the
Mm-hmm.
skills you're actually looking for. So I think with that, it's easy to actually avoid some of the pitfalls we actually go through when it comes to remote hiring within this space. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then you're, as far as I understood, you're trying to build a sort of Africa's largest remote ecosystem, right? So kind of, and I'm just curious, what motivated you to start this initiative, and what has been the most significant impact you have seen so far on Africa's creative talents, in their opportunities to work with global companies?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So initially, I started off because I moved out of college and basically
Mm-hmm.
started working remotely, right? This to me was kind of an opportunity to show the skills I had from a product standpoint to deliver, user-centric products. And I discovered that while I was working on building products, I also got to talk on the global stage about some of the things I was doing, about how I work with the distributed team, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I had events, for example, the Thriving Nomad Summit, I was at those events speaking, Future Work Summit, I was at those events speaking. But I also discovered that within Africa, it was basically the future of work, remote work was kind of a mirage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not many people could live, could work, could succeed from anywhere. And
Right.
so one of the reasons why I decided to start out AfriSplash was to empower the entire ecosystem. And that's evident in the fact that we have had so many other communities come up
Mm-hmm.
out of the innovation we started with as a community. So now we have several remote work communities. We have several remote work platforms that are dedicated specifically to Africans, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those who are, I would say, underserved or not looked at, those who are systematically marginalized, right? And so with that entire aspect of innovation, we actually champion the future of work in Africa and got
Mm-hmm.
others to actually start out on building for the ecosystem as well. And so that has
Mm-hmm.
shown that it takes one to actually drive innovation and then get others on board on that vision and then scale even larger. So with AfriSplash, the community has grown itself, and we have also had other communities build out of AfriSplash remotely, which in turn would actually affect, I would say, the growth of the entire ecosystem positively. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why I started AfriSplash remotely, to give people that chance to live, work, and succeed from
Mm-hmm.
anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's very powerful, in fact. Uh, and I assume like most of maybe companies that come to hire uh, talent from Africa, they're from Europe or from the United States, right? Or there are some other locations. Yeah, those two, the
Yeah,
two major one. Hmm.
we
So,
also promote African talents going remote as well.
uh-huh.
African companies, I mean. Yeah.
Okay. So my question is that this time zone difference, right? So if we take like, for example, United States, right, in African countries, so there is some significant time difference, I assume. So with that, how do you cover this part? How do you deal with this? Do you have any special strategy, special technology that can help with this?
Yeah, I think that's mainly around processes, right? And so if you want to build a distributed team, you don't want to replicate the same process you have from an office-based team, because
Mm-hmm.
they are two things entirely. And so with remote work, you have to be all in to actually ensure your team can actually work perfectly well and deliver at the best level possible. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the first things around that is going async. I think that's a strategy around collaboration, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
it means, for instance, in-person communication does not always have to be instant, in terms of I can actually send you a message right now and you go through the message and give me a reply when it's convenient for you. You choose your own hours and you deliver. And
Mm-hmm.
basically, with the future of work, it means you have more time across your team now, because we have people spread across different time zones. So instead of working, for example, EST 9 to 5, you're basically overlapping across these various time zones, working
Mm-hmm.
asynchronously, and then
Mm-hmm.
achieving more, while other companies are actually closing shop by 5 p.m. because that's when they actually close, right? So your global team is actually even more productive around the clock, and
Mm-hmm.
yet you have actually spread, I would say, the workload across the various teams, individual contributors within this team as well. And so that's one strategy, going asynchronous. And one way to go asynchronous is through documentation.
Right.
That's the hallmark of going async.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, there are several tools I use. For instance, Notion is one good tool, SharePoint is one good tool. You want to be able to build a culture of documentation within your team to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that if I documented something and you weren't on that call or that decision making process and you go through the document, you should have a vivid picture of what was done and what was said during that call, right? And so that gives the entire value to the person, even without them being on that call. And so that's one super important way of actually getting information, getting collaboration going, around the clock. And also, I also use Loom, which is also a good one.
Yeah.
So I can actually have a short video recording and send it to my teammates, and they watch it, within their own time and give a response as well. That, it removes that time of saying, let's find a slot back and forth, right? We actually spend more time trying to find a slot. It takes weeks, days before we actually meet. While we could actually have a video recording sent out to you, you give me feedback, we do the same thing, and then we actually achieve what we want to achieve. So that's a good way to actually collaborate asynchronously as well. And so that's one of the things I encourage companies to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably the last question that I have, considering company, there are a bunch of companies who are just new to this global hiring stuff, and who probably they at this point they're thinking about about their expansion to Africa. What maybe are 3 key things you would like to recommend them before they start this journey?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So one of the first things is build the foundation for having a remote team, and one of that is being inclusive. You think about diversity, you shouldn't think about diversity without thinking about inclusion. How can we actually make sure this diversity we are building can actually work in tandem as one? Think about inclusivity as well. So if I'm going to invite someone to a party, I want to ensure that I give them access to the dancing floor, right? So I want to make sure that the environment in which they find themselves is a place where they can actually contribute, show their expertise, and deliver value to my company. And so setting up the structure is super important. Apart from that, I don't think diversity is something that should be left to a department. It has to be top down. So basically, this has to be championed by the C-suites, the head of department, before we actually come to the individual contributors as well. So it's not something we just have, a few team leads saying we want to be a diverse environment. From the CEO to the crew, and everyone, chief people of operations, they have to be invested in building a diverse and yet inclusive environment. Without that, it's not going to be possible. And the final one is basically looking at the terrain. Basically, you want to look at the local terrain you want to actually go into. There are several things you need to do. For example, you might need to set up a local entity within that space for global hiring. You might need to actually work with an EOR, an employer of record, or a professional employer organization to actually help with global hiring. You want to talk about compliance. You want to ensure that you are compliant with the local labor laws of the region. So Africa is actually a very diverse space. So you have different countries within Africa. You want to be conversant with the local labor laws of these countries as well, because you don't want to end up misclassifying talents, because the penalty of doing that is quite harsh. So the idea is you want to have the system set up to ensure that you can easily find talent, vet them, onboard them, compliantly, and get them to work in a classification that fits, their current role and their current status as well. So that's very important when you think about building the global thing. And I think that's one of the last nuggets I would leave with founders who are looking to actually come into the market. And I think I said this finally before, but I would just want to keep that in. Look for skills and look for attitude as well. That would help you to build a team that would actually go above and beyond to see you achieve your overall objectives as a company as well.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, so I guess we're good. So thanks a lot for sharing your insights on this international hiring stuff, on remote first culture that we should expect working with Africa, right? So about challenges and obstacles, it was really insightful. So yeah, thanks a lot, and keep up the great work you're doing, and take care.
Thank you so much, Liz. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Absolutely. Thank you.